I'm doing here a balancing act with my bottle of water. I'd like to thank you, first of all, for participating. The same as what we did with the other panels. Could you maybe introduce yourself briefly in a couple of minutes and how you are related and connected to this specific topic? Maybe we can start it with you,
I'll try.
Aron.
Thank you. Well, my name is Aron Sorensen. I represent BIMCO here. We are a ship owning organization that covers most of the industry when it comes to sectors. I have to say we're a little bit short when it comes to the cruising industry. We do have a lot of road packs and passenger vessels in our membership, but not so many cruise line ships. Myself, I started my career on a passenger ship doing mini cruises in the catering department, so I know all about the sweat you can get down below when you do the dishes and the bunks and so on. It was good fun. And then I went on to pursue a deck career and ended up, my last position I was a chief mate. And I started teaching in Denmark on navigational colleges, went on to the Danish Maritime Authority, and now I'm here with BIMCO. I think that would be sort of my personal introduction. Thank you.
Thank you, Ron. Bob Fay. I have some almost 40 years experience now in the maritime industry, 22 years at sea, 15 of which as master. And that was my previous life. For the last 16 or so years, I've been working for International Registries, which runs the Marshall Islands Registry. Currently over 4,800 vessels worldwide with 400,000 seafarers registered. And according to Clarkson's, the youngest fleet in the industry at just over 7 years average age of vessel, heavily taken up by tankers, new builds, and new LNG propelled vessels. So we have a vested interest in the sustainability of shipping, the coming training requirements. Under my hat as Vice President for Maritime Operations, I oversee the manning and certification and training for seafarers for our vessels worldwide. Large office here in Manila, offices in Mumbai, seafarer centers, Europe and the United States and Hong Kong. And we have an interest in all of the aspects of training, manning, and regulation. Wearing another hat as Deputy Commissioner of Maritime Affairs for the Marshall Islands, I participate in various groups at the International Maritime Organization, and we are heavily represented at most of the conferences, so we try to stay in front to be proactive of the need for new regulations and requirements. That's why I'm here today. Natalie?
Good afternoon. I'm Natalie Shaw. I'm Director of Employment Affairs for the International Chamber of Shipping. One of our members is the Filipino Ship Owners Association, and an associate member of ours is also CLIA. So I have 2 foots in 2 different doors. Slightly different to Aron. Our remit is to look at representing ship owners' interests across all sectors. So I think we are the leading shipping organisation for ship owners in terms of actually representing across all sectors. Day to day, I focus on employment matters. So I will look at the people aspects of the types of things that Eric is talking about. But I have technical colleagues within the International Chamber who deal with the more day-to-day legislative side of the specifics of a sulphur cap and things like that. So I get involved in the more practical side of how does that affect people. They get involved in the initial policy and decision-making as to what should be happening. Thank you.
I think I can right away start with a question on that last portion that you were saying. Is like, what are you seeing as in the industry? Do you see a mounting pressure on seafarers? How does it affect them? What have you noticed in the recent years, and these developments that are going on right now?
Yes. The short answer. The longer answer, as we all know, I call it the alphabet soup. What we've all seen over the last 10 or 15 years in the industry, a variety of new acronyms thrown at us, whether it be ISO, ISM, MLC, ISPS. Seafarers feel like they're getting alphabet soup thrown at them, and the management side of seafaring, the masters, the chief engineers, chief mates, those moving up, find more responsibility, more administrative responsibility, more legal responsibility with every new acronym we throw at them. So definitely there's more pressure. It's become one of the problems of, that I see is the complacency, perhaps, in the fleet. If it's not, oh, this is just another regulation. Some take more precedence, have more implications and more consequences, particularly for seafarers. As we've seen over the last 20 years, there are no accidents anymore. Somebody has to be to blame. Somebody's going to be pinpointed and put against the bulkhead when something goes wrong. So those regulations become more and more, the resolutions and recommendations become more and more requirements, and the pressure in the end ends up with the management officers on the vessels. So it's very important to get them on board with new regulations and to, as I said, be proactive instead of reactive when things happen.
It works. Good. So, sustainability. This is something that was invented by the Brundtland report back in 1987. And basically, and I have to read this because these are much cleverer people than me that came up with this. They talk about sustainable development that satisfies the need of the present without harming the ability to satisfy of future generations and their needs, which is quite good. It also talks about economic, social, and ecological processes that are connected. So, sustainable development, it is not just environmental protection. It's more a holistic view that require economical prosperity and social stability. And it represents a long-term structural shift in the economical and social systems. Wow. So, seen in that perspective, then we talk about the crew, and always, as we said, when I was aboard, the kick always has the direction downwards, so it ends up with the poor crew members. But to me, in order for crew members to actually absorb all this that comes out of the IMO at the moment, we really need to have both societal support and also the support from ship owners, because the crew cannot do this alone. So I very much agree that there's a lot of pressure put on the crew, but certainly also on the shipping companies, because they have a big responsibility in this as well. Thank you.
Natalie?
Well, as somebody who was a passenger on a cruise ship earlier this year, I think, looking at it from the other perspective, I do think that there's perhaps more visibility for cruise ship staff in terms of the eyes of the customer, to be seen as to what role they're playing and how socially responsible they're acting. So what we do as an industry, perhaps in some of the other sectors, yes, we do those things, but it's not so visible. But there are tangible things, and I think as we move forward, I know that a number of the big players in the industry have some very visible programs going forward to really demonstrate their connection to improving their environmental image. That's going to take further, whether it's regulatory or not, but that's going to put further training pressures on the actual companies to make sure that those values are actually translated into practical steps that the seafarers themselves can take, and the hotel staff and the whole way you go about things. For example, changing the paradigm of encouraging people to have bottled water on board at tables. You know, some of the companies I think are now moving to, you know, having sort of decanters on the tables and those sorts of things. Creating an environment which is positive, but which also changes the mindset of the customers. But that's extra work for a seafarer who's perhaps traditionally used to just picking up 10 of these and putting them around the ship. Suddenly to have to fill decanters, to change that, to make sure the water's properly purified in the right way. It's a different thing. So it's not just about the regulatory. It's, to me, the environmental is also about really understanding what it is that our customer and the environment around us wants, and how we can make sure that actually happens as well. And I do think that's probably a greater challenge for your particular staff than perhaps it is in some of the other sectors as well.
Do you see the cruise sector as the one that is leading this sustainability program within the maritime industry?
In one word, I don't think necessarily that's the case, but I think it will be going forward. As you're growing as a sector and as you become more visible, without any doubt, people's associations of what happens on board a ship is often based and is going to be reflective of the cruise experience that they have. So if more people are immersed in that, then it's obviously going to have a knock-on effect on society. So I think that will be a greater effect going forward, but I'd welcome my colleagues' views on that.
In direct answer to your question, Eric, I think that one of the leading, the cruise sector has to be, just by sheer numbers of employees, one of the leading participants in sustainability and environmental sustainability and protection in shipping. One of the concerns I see, however, is we can train the seafarers to the regulatory requirements. Don't throw plastics or anything in the water. Don't garbage, you know, don't, you know, as I think we saw a presentation earlier. Mm-hmm. What we need more is to educate the why. You know, it's not enough just to train in a new regulation, new requirement. We've heard other acronyms, as I said earlier, CSR, you know, corporate social responsibility, sustainability. But I travel, you know, to here to Manila or to Mumbai, and I take a taxi through the town and see garbage floating in the waters. I see people throwing garbage in the water. I remember years ago, you know, at Nariman Point, I was at a conference in Mumbai. I specifically saw a car pull up, a fella get out of the back, take some garbage out, throw it over the seawall. You know, this is what, you know, areas where our seafarers are coming from feel. Now, why is it so important that I don't drop a coffee cup in the water? Right. You know, there's a big ocean out there. Yeah. You know, so we have to educate the why, not just the what, you know, for moving forward, you know, and let everyone know why it's important.
It's like sustainability 2.0. Like also educating the people at home, and that they bring that education home to their families, and that they are also not.
I could just to follow up on that. Part of this is not really education. Part of this is culture, and we see a large change of the culture of young people in Europe. I'm not aware of this happening out here, but probably it is. So they are thinking in a much more sustainable way. They don't want to eat meat. They don't want to use plastic. And so on. So we see it as a change of culture, and that change of culture eventually will end up on the ships, because your crew members are going to be taken for that particular pool of new people coming up with a different culture than we had. I remember when I was at sea, we which is many years ago, so it wasn't legal, I have to say. We had people just throwing plastic overboard, and when you confronted it with them, they were saying, "Oh, it just disappears into the ocean." So that was the mindset at that time, and that has moved a lot until now, and it will move even further. So the culture is very, very important. Thank you.
Are there any? Do we have any questions from the audience at this moment?
education in any movement of change is the most important factor. Are we doing enough to bring our message to the children in the schools about this? And what type of programs do you have to do these type of things?
I think it very much depends on each country, the maritime clusters, and also there are certain industry initiatives as well and corporate programs. So there's on both a country level, there's on a corporate level, and then there's on a cluster level from the types of initiatives that CLIA, for example, as an organisation has. So there are different ways of dealing with this. And I think sometimes they work in collaboration, sometimes they work separately. And for example, in the UK, they have the UK MNCB, that Merchant Navy Training Board, which goes out and talks to schools about careers in the industry. And certainly part of their materials is about the sustainability and the importance, because that message is getting out to people outside. And if we're not seen to be green, and we're not seen to be understanding that oily birds, for example, which is always a picture which is put up about our industry, even though I think that's ridiculous. You've got to start to actually get people to understand we do take these things very seriously. And one thing going forward, and I was listening this morning to the growth of moves into Arctic waters and into, increase going to the fields and possibly, we're entering into new territories with the cruise industry. And as a consequence, we have a social responsibility to those particular communities that we're actually going into. So I think part of the education process is actually really making people aware and understand the impact of ships going into those types of waters, what that's actually going to do to those areas. Is it going to have an impact on breaking climate change and stuff like that? And if it is, what are we actually trying to do to put back to make sure we take our steps right? And that's what the kids want to know.
I would agree in direct response. It's regional. So my overall answer would be no, we're not doing enough worldwide, globally, to bring, students in, lower level grade schools and whatnot to, face the situation or the reality of the future, if we continue to pollute, the way it has in the past. There are organizations regionally. I know of NEMIPA. I know you're familiar with the North American Marine Environmental Protection Agency. They depend on contributions and wanted to bring posters and education programs to school children. They try and reach out globally with different conferences and bring the subject to everyone's attention. Again, they're not well funded. They depend on company support. The message is there, but it does need to be spread more to the younger generation. And as Eric mentioned, in Europe, it's the younger generation that's taking the flag, and leading the way in that regard, and that's what's necessary worldwide.
Denmark's probably a leader in this.
As an industry, I think we're probably one of the best, the cruise ship industry. I think Eric can vouch for that. When you see what goes on board a ship regarding the garbage, bottle collection, everything is, cardboard gets packed up. The problem is when it gets ashore, we don't know what happens to it, do we? Or,
Right.
But
Is that part of a sustainability model that you should have as an operating line, or as even a training provider that provides training to our crew, or supplies items to us as an industry? Does sustainability just stick with you as the company, or do you have to build it as a model that also connects you with everybody around you?
I think you have a responsibility, and it's coming in the cruise line that you have to know where it goes. So you have to sign off. So if it goes to landfill, you need to know where it goes or how it's used. I mean, we see China now not taking any more plastics, are they? So in Europe, plastic's piling up. all sorts of garbage is piling up. And I think as nations in European nations, we've been very bad at what we've done with our garbage. We've given it away. We send it to places like the Philippines and India, hoping they do something with it. It doesn't happen anymore, does it? So people have to be more aware. And you've got people like Seakeepers, Clean Seas, in the UK, Clean Seas with the Merchant Navy Training Board. I think if you told people in India that you've got kids on beaches in England cleaning beaches up, they'd laugh at you a little bit, wouldn't they? You know, and this is the way we're going. It happens in Holland, doesn't it, as well, and in a lot of European countries. Young people are out there on their Saturdays cleaning beaches.
Now I see a lot of these movies going around on Facebook as well. Four Oceans, I think, is one of those organizations where they film that there was more garbage floating around in the waters around Bali than there were fish in the water. And those things are traveling around the globe very quick, and we see that we have, what is it, for passengers on board, we have 3,000 people on board with these devices, and they broadcast it to the world as faster than anybody can react. And that is for us, I think, as an industry, probably one of the pieces that is hard to adapt to, that speed even. Natalie.
But can I pose a question back to the floor to somebody from the actual sector? I don't know if anybody's here from a cruise company, for example, that goes to the Galapagos Islands, but I mean the number of vessels going to the Galapagos has dramatically increased in the last few years. People go to the Galapagos because of the Darwinian connection and the image that they have. How do you balance that, and how do you counterbalance that as an industry, which obviously wants to promote tourism and wants to get people there, but to recognise that you want it to be sustainable business models that you can actually have your industry continuing to be there in 50 years' time without compromising it?
Between going to the Galapagos and then going to St. Martin with 6 super ships, because that's pollution, that's people pollution, isn't it? It's the same thing, isn't it?
Well, I'm using the Galapagos data as an example, but I'm posing the question back to the floor because at the end of the day, that goes back to the education of the staff and trying to make sure that when people have that experience, it's a responsible experience such that the company has a sustainability to continue to go to there or go to St. Martin in 20 or 30 years' time without having compromised it. I mean, what are you doing as companies specifically to make sure when you visit these particular places you're not having an impact?
One of the things that I have experienced with not the Galapagos but with Antarctica, when we started saying, I don't have any experience with the Galapagos Islands. I've never been there, but I have been several times down to Antarctica, and it is a bit questionable. I understand why people would ask why cruise ships are going there, but it is very scenic, and there is a demand for it, so it makes money. But at the same time, when we go there, there's a lot of time as you go there to educate the people, and it's a different type of cruise. It's not the young cruisers who are going. We're not going to Antarctica to party. They're going there for the experience. The experience is the nature. So the whole cruise is tailored around that side of things. People are buying into that, into the environment, into the sustainability. The people, we go down, we visit the scientists that are down there. They come on, they give speeches, they talk about the impact of the environment, and that's one of the reasons they're down there in the first place to study that sort of impact. So while you can say, yeah, it's questionable that we should be there in the first place, we are giving it the exposure, and we're educating people and giving it the right kind of exposure. It's not getting exploited. I don't know about the Galapagos, but just one example. Same with Antarctica. Alaska, sorry.
Right, thank you.
But the Galapagos is the Ecuadorian government, don't they? They limit ships. Chile. Is Ecuador? I just checked. I mean, before I said something, it's Ecuador. Ecuador. They limit the amount of ships, don't they? The amount of passengers. How many people are ashore at any one time? So I suppose in a way they are very much ahead of the game. And as you said, Sean, with Antarctica. But it comes back to what I said again. Everywhere there is pollution in one way or another, whether it's pollution by 3 or 4 people going to a beach or by 3,000 people going on a beach, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. I think that's true. Question in the back?
Yeah, hi. Well, it's more of a comment, really. I think just wanted to get back to the impact of environmental sustainability standards on crewing. We've already agreed that, the crew at the pointy end, they're going to see. Sorry. I think probably most people could hear me anyway. I'm not known for being quiet. So yeah, the question is to get back to this this impact on crewing. So what we can say is there's going to be more regulation, so more opportunities for the crew to trip up. They're going to, excuse me, and they're going to be exposed to more different types of equipment, more ballast water treatment systems, exhaust gas scrubbers, forms of energy that we haven't, new forms of fuel and energy, some of which we haven't even thought of yet. And I think the right question must be for us is how do we make that easier for them? How do we apply technology? How do we review our supply chains, for example? So nothing more irritating on a ship than getting a bunch of machinery spare parts delivered to you covered in polystyrene beads, and it still happens. So that the obligation that we have in ashore is how do we make it easier for them to comply? The application of technology, for example, it is entirely possible now to geotag and prevent the operation of equipment that shouldn't be operated like oily water separating equipment in the wrong place. At the moment, we rely on education, push it on the seafarer, and actually we could, by design and fairly simply, make it a lot easier for them so that you can build compliance into the ship. And that, I think, would go a long way to making it easier for them. But that's, the direction of travel is more stuff, more equipment, right, more regulation, more opportunities to screw up. Yeah. Thanks.
Okay, and is there any other questions? Aron?
Thank you. Well, you're of course right. You could build these things into the systems, but there will still be emergencies where you would have to use them anyway. So there would be. It's not that easy just to do it. That's one thing. The other thing is that, and this triggered me. There was one again today saying, 80% is human error. But the thing is, when it comes to very complex systems, it may not be the human that is in error. It's actually a combination of the system and the human and the situation. And we always blame the humans for doing all the wrong things. We never tap them on the shoulder saying you did right because the seafarers does it right in the most majority of cases. Only a few cases where it goes wrong. Thank you.
Yeah, and there's only a few cases where you'd have to do the MARPOL override. So I think you can build it in.
And actually, I just mentioned it. It's not that simple.
And I think actually the 80% figure is wrong. It's 100%. Because somebody built it, somebody designed it, somebody operated it, and but we just tend to look at blame the ship. But actually, I spent 4 years running a human factors program in the UK, and that's something we do quite badly in shipping, is understanding those interactions between the humans, other humans, the machinery and the environment. We still design poorly to begin with, and that's why I'm saying I think we've still got opportunities in design and operation to be better.
That's a good point, Eric, if I could address that, because something came to my attention this morning. I wasn't able to be here at the CrewConnect. I was over at the round table with Amarest discussing automation in shipping, maritime automation, ship systems. And again, not to be glib or bring up the acronym that they were using was Maritime Autonomous Surface Ships, MASS. And it occurred to me as I was reading the notes coming here, we're talking about maritime environmental sustainability standards, MESS. So perhaps it is good if we go to Mass to pray for a way past the mess.
I just want to ask the industry, it is a small question. We have educated very well our crew on board regarding plastics, etc., and it is a very good sustainable model, almost on all the passenger industry particularly. But there is one thing which I have noticed recently, that the crew does not have the emissions and carbon and that kind of information and knowledge. I agree with that, and that it is culture. So as an industry, this is a small comment and a food for thought, how we can create a culture in the industry where we can teach the people, look, keeping the oven on for 24/7, it's not a good idea. Running the laundry machine for longer than required to just make it perfectly clean doesn't make any sense. We need to, can we do this something out of this conference, that we can go back to the industry and we can create this cultural change for emissions control and carbon footprint?
In a simple answer, there is a lot of work going on in that particular field, not just for the passenger ship industry, but across the whole of the shipping industry. And certainly reductions in greenhouse gas emissions and stuff is a major part of our focus and part of the commitments that's had to be made as part of the requirements, not just at IMO, but also under the UNCC climate change requirements.
One is small comment from the greenhouse gases emissions. I mean, this is a very strange thing. We are noticing that I'm an LNG researcher, and we have noticed that the whole industry is going towards LNG. That is the methane molecule. We think it is right. That is 27 times more serious volatile organic compound than the carbon itself. It has a bigger carbon footprint, and our methane slip is a serious matter, and we are all going towards LNG.
I think I'll jump on that one. Yes, you're right. It's a much more aggressive greenhouse gas when it comes to methane, especially if you have slips. I'm not particularly convinced that the whole industry is going towards LNG. We do see it, especially in Northern Europe, in short route or short sea shipping. We see it. We've seen it on LNG carriers for a long time. So we estimate at around now we have around 500 ships with LNG propulsion. More ships are built with dual purpose, so they can use both oil and LNG. So in the future it might be. But one of the things that may hinder LNG being worldwide used is that the infrastructure ashore is not there, and it's very, very expensive to bring it up. In Northern Europe, that's on the forefront of this. We estimate it'll cost around 240 million euros just to get the infrastructure there. And who's going to pay for that? I don't see that at the moment. Can I just add one thing about the regulation? Because regulation isn't necessarily sustainable. Because when it comes to IMO, for example, they lack the holistic view on things. So, ballast water, let's give an example. It's definitely, and we need to ensure that we do not get invasive species transported from one place to the other. It's a very good purpose. So the CITA come up with a regulation that costs a lot of energy. So by coming up with a regulation on ballast water management, you increase the greenhouse gas emissions. So, as I said, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's sustainable, but because there's a lack of holistic approach to it from the IMO and from governments and so on. Thank you.
Thank you. I promised, I think, that I was going to finish on time. and that's around now. So I'll, first of all, I want to thank the three panelists for their answers and cooperation.